Welcome to the FounderVideo podcast, an interview series bringing you the latest and greatest info on B2B marketing, revenue operations, and go-to-market strategy from respected experts. Here is your host, Will Martin.
All right, so we're here for another episode of the FounderVideo podcast. Today we're here with Ashley Faus, head of lifecycle marketing and portfolio at Atlassian, among other things. A big thought leader in the B2B space and B2B marketing and thought leadership, content strategy, content marketing, all things related. And we're here to talk about what is actually thought leadership and whatnot. So yeah, welcome, Ashley.
Yeah, super excited to chat about this. I get real excited about thought leadership stuff, so this will be fun.
Awesome. Yeah, the first question I wanted to ask you that I've been asking to all of the guests that come to the podcast is, who is, in this case, Ashley Faus, right? What do people need to know about your past in order to understand who you are today as a professional, most importantly?
I'll use the tagline that I've been using for quite a while now. So I am a marketer, writer, and speaker by day, and a singer, actor, and fitness fiend by night. And I would say that tells you a little bit about me professionally and also personally. And then it gives you a sense of, the vibes you're going to get when you bring me onto a podcast, or if you start following me on LinkedIn. Occasionally, you're going to see some cake pics. Occasionally, you're going to see some theater pictures. There will be some fitness conversations that happen as an example of the content strategy and using content depths. So I kind of like to pair that personal and professional.
Nice. Because I've seen you've been for quite some time now at Atlassian, but I'm sure that people must not know as much about your past as a professional or what leads you to stay at Atlassian for so many years, and just a little bit more of your career, if you could. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm probably one of the few people who actually got a degree in marketing and then immediately started working in marketing. And I've been working in marketing for over 15 years. Most people stumble into it or they get some generic degree and then they're like, oh, I really want to move into marketing, right? So I'm probably one of the few people that actually got a marketing degree and uses it. I've worked across a number of industries. I was in solar and aviation very early in my career. I worked for Duarte, which is a communication design and training firm. I was at 2 security startups prior to Atlassian, so a cloud access security broker and then a hyper-converged infrastructure, which is a mouthful, but that has kind of, it was actually useful for us to have a category because the way we were trying to define ourselves, we had like this whole hodgepodge of things. So that's secure hyper-converged infrastructure is actually the like shortened version of that positioning. But the common thread through all of those is my ability to fall in love with an audience. And so I love to figure out who are the people behind the screen, what are their pain points, and not just so I can exploit those to sell them a product that I'm currently working on, but to really understand them as whole humans, because that allows you to speak their language, that allows you to fall in love with the same problems that they fall in love with. And then obviously you can start to connect the problems that they have with solutions that you offer. And if you don't offer a solution, that's totally fine. Don't waste their time or your time and money trying to sell them something that they don't need. They're going to end up being a very expensive customer in the long run if you force them into something that they don't need. So that's a little bit from a career perspective. I would call myself a marketing generalist, which again is a little bit controversial. Most people fall back on the quote, a jack of all trades is a master of none. They forget the last part of that quote, which is a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And so I take that to heart. I love pulling in a bunch of different skills. Similar to my quippy bio, I like to combine a bunch of different areas of knowledge and skills and expertise and experience. And I think that's something that has really served me throughout my career as I've gone from different industries, different audiences, and different problem sets. It's that ability to say, how do I combine all of these different things to really connect with the humans behind the screen?
Love that. And today, in this world we live in these days, like it's even most important, like way more important than before, to be well-rounded and to be T-shaped, so to speak, right? Because sure, you can become super specialized in one area, but let me train a chatbot that has all of the knowledge in that area and it will beat you again and again, right? So might as well just combine, as you were saying, different skills and come at solutions that involve different parts of different processes. And you as a leader must know better as well than me that in order to execute on different strategies and programs that are sometimes disruptive or that are new, that are innovative and whatnot, you need to be able to put together all of those pieces, right? Talking about pieces, let's talk about the first one that we're going to touch on this podcast, which is thought leadership, right? For people that don't know yet, what the fuck is thought leadership, right? Because everyone talks about it, everyone, right? It's kind of a buzzword these days on LinkedIn too, and it's in the name and the concept of it. Everyone must understand, but the implications of the concept and how it's embedded into marketing strategies, that's where the nitty gritty comes in. So I want to, how would you define thought leadership?
Yeah. So at its core, if we just literally go to the phrase thought leadership, it's have thoughts, be a leader. And what tends to happen is that folks are only doing one of those things, right? I see this a lot. Marketers will say, we're going to do thought leadership for the founder. And it's like, okay, so what's happening now? Well, we're going to just create a bunch of content that is, and because it's from the founder, they have a big title. So, they're a leader right there. That makes it. And I'm like, okay, again, that's great. They are a leader. That is correct. But they don't have any thoughts. If somebody else is doing all the thinking and writing, that means they don't have any thoughts, right? In contrast, there's a lot of people who like to pontificate, or maybe they're huddled away in the lab, working on all of this stuff and pushing these forward. They've got all these frameworks and everything, but it's locked in a place where no one else can access it, learn from it, implement it, build on it, etc. And so they have a lot of thoughts, but they're not being a leader. So you got to have both. The next question is then, cool, I agree with you, have thoughts, be a leader. How do I do that, right? So from a tactical perspective, I've come up with 4 pillars. So credibility, profile, being prolific, and then strong depth of ideas. And so these pillars work together in tandem. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the details of these things over the course of this episode. But the pillars work together in tandem, and most people are kind of working their way up from the bottom. And so if you have, let's say, this founder, they're probably actually quite strong in credibility because they've been doing this a while. They've founded a company. In theory, they're quite successful. And they might even have a decent profile. So particularly if you're a really hot startup, you're just gone to unicorn status, a lot of people might know who you are. But in most cases, these people are super busy. They're running the company. They're founding these unicorn companies. And so they're not prolific. They're not sharing. They're not on stage. They're not on podcasts. They're not writing because they're too busy doing their job. And then they also don't have strong depth of ideas. And this is an area where people get tripped up because they're like, no, but they're super smart. And I'm like, yes, but if they haven't actually codified that and put that out into the world to actually shape the conversation, help people change direction or change their minds, they're just really good at their job. But they're not actually strong in depth of ideas. So that's a big gap that I see for a lot of people who want, they've got an executive or a founder that they want to build into a thought leader. That strong depth of ideas also fuels that being prolific piece. So once you've got your strong depth of ideas, you've got to now go and share it. That obviously helps you build a stronger profile, have increased reach, get into more prestigious outlets or stages, which obviously reinforces your credibility. Obviously, if you don't have strong credibility to begin with, you're probably not going to be able to get into even the lowest level of outlets or podcasts or stages. So, right, these things all work together in tandem. If you have nothing to say, then you're not going to have much credibility because it's kind of like, okay, you have a good title, but what are you saying, right? So again, some people think oh, it's really one pillar over another. You need to excel in a certain area. And the reality is that you need to look across all the pillars and understand where you're strong, where you're weak when you first start out. And then that'll help you hone in on the areas where you need to spend additional time to really jumpstart that journey to becoming a thought leader.
Love that. I love that you called out the founder that is, yeah, we're going to do thought leadership for the founder. Then it's not thought leadership anymore, right? Because it's if somebody else is writing the thoughts, then it's not the leader thinking and sharing that
Right.
depth of ideas. I want to ask you for an example, because when we talk about depth of ideas, it's an abstract concept, right? Like putting out a codified way of thinking that it's all put together and that changes the paradigm, I'm assuming, right? It's just like a new perspective by which you can start thinking in a different way, right? And that involves having a bunch of content first, of course, being innovative, talking about different non-obvious stuff that comes from doing the work, of course, right? But I want to ask you for an example, like how does that look like? Because I'm sure you've seen multiple, countless examples on LinkedIn, most importantly, right? But of people that introduce new concepts to the market or new ways of thinking. How does that look like, and how it's done?
Sure. I'm actually going to go to a little bit of an old school example and talk about Nancy Duarte's work. So, for those who are unfamiliar, Nancy is an expert in persuasive communication and particularly focused on persuasive storytelling and persuasive presentations. So, she wrote a book. At this point, it's been 15, maybe 20 years ago, called Resonate. And the subtitle of it is The Secret Structure of Great Talks. And she did a TEDx talk on this, but she basically mapped a bunch of the best speeches throughout history to understand why they resonated with people so much. And one of the core concepts of Resonate is like resonance as like a scientific or a technical concept, is that when you hit a certain frequency, like from a sound perspective, it will actually like agitate physical material and make it move. And so that's the concept of resonating, is that if you resonate with your audience, you touch the exact right frequency in them to make them take action. And so just from like a conceptual perspective, you're like, wow, okay, cool. That makes sense. I understand this with, she's got an example of almost this like tuning fork, and it's kind of an interesting physical example of how this works. And, these like little balls will start to move around because you have hit the resonant frequency. And so you think about that for your audience. But the way she talks about this is this concept of move from and move to. And so how do you get your audience to move from their current state and move to their next state? And so she's mapped all of these different talks with this move from, move to, move from, move to. And she's basically kind of created this structure where you can visualize these talks and you can understand the frequency that you need to move between them to create that resonance. And so she connected these concepts of persuasion and storytelling to this physical concept, right? And then she mapped that out into tactics of how you collect stories, how you tell stories, right? She mapped it back to Joseph Campbell's work. So this is another thing, the concept that like, well, there's nothing new under the sun. And yes, that is generally true. Most of us are not discovering net new knowledge or net new planets or net new scientific theories, right? But when you start combining work from adjacent fields and applying it in a new way, that's innovative. And so she actually tied her framework back to the hero's journey that was built on Joseph Campbell's work. And so just the way that she connected all of that from a conceptual level, like that was a new thought, the way of thinking about how you craft a speech, mapping that speech to this pattern. It's a repeatable framework that you can use. So that's what happened at a conceptual level. Then from a strategic standpoint, she came in with a number of other kind of frameworks and examples of how to use humor in presentations, examples of how to use case studies in presentations. And then from a tactical level, she actually ended up building out several workshops that you can take where there's a facilitator, there's a number of exercises that you can fill out to basically craft a persuasive presentation using her framework. And so all of that obviously makes her very prolific. She's written several books. She's spoken on a number of stages. She's on podcasts. She's got, I don't even know, I think 100,000 or so followers on LinkedIn. She is prolific, contributing to articles. She created this whole set of courses before courses were like the thing to do, right? She was doing workshops and then turned that into an e-course. And the other thing from a depth of ideas perspective, which I alluded to as I went through, is this idea of content depths. And so she's got a conceptual idea. She's got several strategic elements, which is the key knowledge components, processes, system, tools that you need to be able to bring that conceptual idea to life. And then from a tactical perspective, the nitty gritty, prescriptive, where the rubber meets the road, she's got all of these kind of like sub frameworks that help implement the strategies and support the strategies to make that conceptual idea reality. So she's got all of those depths. And then obviously, if you look across the 4 pillars, tons of credibility in the space. She did a TED Talk. She's got books. She's got a lot of followers. Profile, same thing, that follower count, the prestige of the stages that she's on. Prolific. Again, I've named numerous types of content and channels that she creates. And then the depth of ideas we just covered.
Love that. I didn't know about her. I'll check her out. So back to the definition of thought leadership, and I want to wrap it up quickly because there's a bunch of topics that I want to cover with you. But I just have a question on that because you just mentioned how you need to connect the dots and take from different disciplines in order to put out something that's actually not world changing, but that shifts perspective and that goes from move to and all that stuff. So can a master of something or someone that specializes in a specific niche or area of business or whatever be a thought leader? Can you actually lead with your thoughts if you're only specialized in one single discipline? Because it seems to me that in order to achieve depth of ideas, you need to, see the connection between disciplines and put together different areas to come up with new ways of thinking. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think it's possible to become a thought leader even if you've gone deep in one discipline. Usually the way that happens is you actually start to connect your area of expertise in new ways. So this might be something where it's not necessarily you pulling from other disciplines. It might be you pushing to other disciplines or other teams, if that makes sense. So for example, if you're putting out brand new research that another team or another discipline can adopt and utilize, then you're a thought leader. But I would say if you are not changing the way people think, changing the conversation, shaping the conversation, driving the conversation in a new direction, in that case, you're probably behaving more as a subject matter expert. So if we were to rank, I get this question a lot too, right? Like, which is better, a subject matter expert, an influencer, or a thought leader? And I'm like, well, you use them in different ways. They achieve different things. And so if you've got someone who's very strong in depth of ideas, but is potentially not as strong in being prolific or the profile, and they're again, if they've got strong depth of ideas, they're probably strong in credibility as well, because they've been in this field for 20 years. They've been the person who's like driving and focusing all the research, right? So they've probably got a lot of credibility. In that case, you're probably looking at someone who's a subject matter expert. And so the areas where you need to lean in with them are on building that profile and helping them be more prolific with their depth of ideas, because that research is probably just kind of locked in their discipline or within their team. So yes, I think you can be a thought leader if you have strong expertise in a single discipline. But again, you've got to put that knowledge out into the world so that it moves either your discipline, your team, other teams, and adjacent disciplines forward.
This podcast is brought to you by FounderVideo. We'll cut your LinkedIn ads costs by at least 50% with natural-looking creatives that prospects actually want to consume. Just have an expert in your C-suite show up to a 90-minute interview once a month and let us take care of the rest. Turn LinkedIn ads from an accepted line item expense into a scalable revenue channel that fits into your go-to-market strategy. Book a free consultation at FounderVideo.io.
And so it's not only about optimizing for the channel, but it's optimizing for a different audience in that case then, right? Because you're putting out content like you got to make it so that it resonates with our adjacent disciplines so that it can be applied and it becomes a new way of thinking, right? You touched on subject matter experts. Chris Walker talks about key opinion leaders. There's thought leaders as well, of course, influencers, whatnot. Influencer marketing is I mean, it's always been around in B2B, but now there's a much more conversation about it. So let's put the difference. And for everyone listening, of course, Ashley has put this together in graphics that look awesome, and you can check it out on your LinkedIn, right? So you can have a more visual image of what this looks like: prolific, depth of ideas, all that stuff. So because these are abstract concepts and it's hard. I mean, it's easy to understand, but then operating with that framework in mind is not as easy, right? So give me kind of like the breakdown in terms of touching on those four pillars. What are the differences between subject matter experts and first off, I want your take on, what do you think is a key opinion leader? Would it be a synonym for subject matter expert or influencer, or what does that lie? And then influencers and thought leaders. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting about the key opinion leader is that that's actually like a kind of an official designation for some disciplines. So I actually presented this concept to a convention that was focused on helping dental professionals grow their personal brands, write books, speak on stages, etc. So I talked about this. And for them, the key opinion leader is actually like a designation that is given by some of the governing associations. So I don't know. I don't know that distinction is as relevant to like B2B marketers as it is to some of the disciplines that are regulated. I would say a key opinion leader is probably closer, like just generically, if we take that definition versus the actual official designation, I would say that it's probably more similar to a thought leader, where it's someone who is driving that conversation forward. I would say it's probably like on the cusp of that subject matter expert versus the thought leader, and probably leans more toward thought leader. But yeah, there's some industries where that is kind of like an official designation compared to what marketing tends to do, which is like declare themselves to be a thought leader or declare themselves to be an influencer. And it's like, okay, the first rule of thought leadership is that you don't call yourself a thought leader. And I know that's kind of spicy. I actually got called out on a podcast recently. It was a panel where someone was referencing my framework, and it was Michelle J. Raymond, who's awesome. She's on LinkedIn, and she was like, I actually really like how Ashley talks about this. So that was nice. But another panelist mentioned like, I think you could call yourself a thought leader. And I was like, ooh, I don't think you could call yourself a thought leader. Like it's at least the way that it's currently discussed in a B2B marketing context, there's a lot of baggage. And part of the reason that people struggle to call themselves a thought leader, or like it's kind of cringy when you do that, is precisely because so many people are mistakenly calling themselves thought leaders. Like they're just out there being like, as a thought leader, and you're just like, that's weird. Like pick something else, right? Like say, as a marketer with 15 years of experience. All right, cool. But
right, be objective with it. Yeah, like you cannot. It's arrogant at the very least. Like you cannot. Yeah. If you want to become great, you need to put yourself in tiny shoes, so to speak, or like. I mean, I like this phrase a lot from the Bible, and it's not like I'm the most religious guy ever or anything, but like. It's for everyone who exalts themselves will be humbled, and for everyone who humbles themselves will be exalted, right? Like if you want to call yourself a thought leader, then it loses all of its weight. Like it's not, yeah. But either way, touching and this could be related, but I wanted to ask you a question. What do you think is the biggest challenge right now in B2B marketing that you think hasn't been properly addressed by current strategies and tools, and especially let's break that in content marketing most specifically, because if we talk about all of the challenges that are that B2B marketing is facing, there are so many. But in content marketing, content strategy, and thought leadership and whatnot, especially in social, what do you think is the biggest challenge that hasn't been addressed properly yet?
I'm on a whole rant right now about attribution. Attribution is, oh man, we're having the struggles. And actually, particularly in this thought leadership conversation, right? It's really hard if you are pushing something new. You do have to find where the existing conversations are happening in order to change those conversations, right? Like if you're just off in the ether spouting things by yourself, again, you're having thoughts, but you're not being a leader. And so in order for you to lead the conversation, you have to be in the conversation. And so from an attribution standpoint, this is really hard for, particularly for large companies where they might actually have multiple people who have the credibility and have the depth of ideas, and they're building a profile, they're being prolific, right? Like they might actually have a number of people who are strong in these pillars and could be considered thought leaders in their relative disciplines. How do you track that? Like all of my LinkedIn content, the engagement, the reach, the direct messages, how does Atlassian know if that's having an effect for them? If it is, what is that effect? And then, okay, if we figure out that it's a positive effect, how big, right? Like all of that is kind of locked in my personal space. Now, there are tools. So for example, Shield is a good tool for this, for LinkedIn particularly, where you can have all of the employees connect their personal profiles to the dashboard, and then you can see reach and engagement and whatever, right? That still doesn't account for things like direct messages. You reached out to me and invited me onto this podcast because you saw my thought leadership post and you were like, this girl seems to know what she's talking about. I'm going to invite her, right? So now we have to separately somewhere note that like, oh, okay, Ashley was on this podcast with Will. Okay, well, do we need to like note the source of that? Well, the source is LinkedIn. Oh, okay, but like where specifically in the journey on my content did you decide to reach out to me, right? Like it's really hard. We struggle to map owned journeys. How the heck are we going to map all the possible journeys that could happen, right? Same thing. Conferences are another big one, right? I speak at a number of conferences about these topics. And so things like acceptance rate if I pitch versus inbound inquiries for me to come to a conference. Atlassian kind of doesn't see all of that unless I surface it to them. And so if you're, a founder or executive and you're running a program like this, you might have some centralization on that. You might have somebody, who has access to the account so they can see the DMs. You might have access, you might be the person pitching them or looking at the inbound invites for them to come speak. So like, it's easier if it's only one person and it's run by a single team. But again, in large companies, you might have an editorial team. You might have a content marketing team that's more focused on product stuff. You might have a comms team. You might have like a dedicated founder, EA, or chief of staff or comms person that's separate from like the company comms people, right? So the attribution piece, I think, is really hard now that the barrier to entry is so much lower for content creation and distribution. It's really hard to understand all of the things that are impacting that journey, and then what that impact is and what the time horizons are. Like that's really hard.
It is, and it is because I think in most cases, not even the consumer or like the buyer knows exactly how to map out their journey, because there's so much out there. We do so much on the internet every single day, take so many actions that it's of course like, look, you were asking before, like hypothetically, right? Like where in your content have I decided to reach out in order to invite you? Not necessarily in a specific part, right? Like I read through your articles, I follow you on LinkedIn, I see you on my feed every single time, right? And so that it stays top of mind because you paid the price up front of being in there, right? Of being prolific again. And that comes back in numerous ways, an exponential return, right? And that's what people I think need to understand with content marketing. It's not a linear return type of equation of top of funnel consideration, then lead gen form, and then I can track it all, and it's all super stable and predictable revenue and whatnot. It's not nowhere near that, right? It's something that you just gotta do, and if you don't do, you're missing out big, and that's it. And you better figure it out quickly because it's only getting harder, right? However, I must say, have you heard of hockey stack?
I have, yeah. So actually, humorously, who was it that reached out to me? I would have to look at my DMs. I commented, they were talking about basically using Hockey Stack. They were mapping the journey and they showed, all of the touch points. And I commented, I was like, super curious to know what the last touch point was or whatever, like super curious to know how it actually got attributed, right? And I was being kind of sarcastic as a little bit of a quip on the last touch attribution model that a lot of companies use, and kind of being like, oh yeah, there's 50 touch points, but the conversion on the pricing page, like the pricing page is our highest converting page. And I'm like, well, of course it is. That's not fair. Like that, like of course your pricing page is a good conversion page, right? So I was like being quippy, and it was someone from Hockey Stack posting this, and he replied and he was like, well, Ashley, you have to understand the touch points, whatever. And I was like, oh, sorry, you don't know me. I agree with you. And I'm like being sarcastic about the fact that often the last touch attribution has outsized weight in this model, whatever. And I said, I'm 100% on board with you. I was being quippy, but sorry, like you don't know me well enough to realize that, right? I should have added /sarcasm, right? So he DM'd me and he was like, hey, sorry, I didn't realize, I was like, no, it's totally fine. Like, this is funny. And I was like, yeah, I'm frustrated about this. Like, I'm having a whole conversation. And I was just sitting there and I was like, I guarantee you he's going to ask me if I know Hockey Stack and if I'm interested in, a demo or whatever. Sure enough, he comes back and he's like, I know we just met, in the comments, but we actually solved this problem. And so if it ever occurs to you that you want to check us out, and I was like, this is actually how you do sales, right? And I told him, I was like, full disclosure, I'm not the decision maker and I am not the budget holder. So while I experience this problem and I am happy to surface it to the decision makers and the budget holders, I'm not that person. And this is not a timely conversation right now for what you would be looking at for sales. And I was like, however, if I was that person, I would take a meeting with you. And like, this is how you do sales. So go tell whoever you need to tell that like it worked. You're building the relationship. You're doing the right things, right? So, yeah, it's Dream Data is another one. I follow Laura Erdem. Her and I followed her for like 2 or 3 years at this point. We met at Inbound. So yes, there are a number of kind of up and coming. I just discovered Telium is also, I think, in this same space. So like my understanding is Telium is a little bit more old school or whatever, more of an incumbent in this space. And then Hockey Stack and Dream Data are kind of more newcomers. But yeah, it's super interesting. And again, Hockey Stack and Dream Data are like killing it with LinkedIn. Their LinkedIn game is so strong. And the fact that I know both of them, even though I'm not really I'm sort of their target audience, but not their true ICP. But the fact that I know about them and I'm standing here talking about them speaks very well to their approach from both a content and social media and sales perspective. Again, I know I'm often harsh on the salespeople, but like I got to give it to them. They both did a great job.
No, for sure. And I think it's because when you do marketing well enough, sales come their way. Like it's not sales itself. I think if you craft a good enough go-to-market strategy, then sales is kind of figured out. Like it just comes. Like, look, these guys, it's worth a case study because I need to make a post on Hockey Stack strategy and how they have built such a strategy, especially with LinkedIn, right? They got they're putting out a bunch of, they're super prolific, right? in terms of content and whatnot. And I think they're doing a great job. And I think it's interesting because I listened to a pod as well of the founder, current CRO, Amir. He was talking about how all of that data of DMs, touch points on LinkedIn, organic reach, and all of that stuff, LinkedIn knows about that data. It's in their, right? It's in their API. The problem is they're not, right. The thing is we are yet to build a software, so to speak. I mean, and Hockey Stack, I think it's pioneering that space. Dream Data probably too. I'm not that familiar with Dream Data. I'm connected with Laura and whatnot, but like I'm not that deep into it. But my point is we I was listening that they were in conversation back in August with LinkedIn to talk about how could they connect Hockey Stack to the Slack APIs and LinkedIn APIs in order to get a glimpse into dark social for attribution, right, in B2B. So that is, I think, an exciting space, and I agree with you that attribution for content marketing and thought leadership and all of the organic social game, it's the biggest challenge. And I don't think we should worry about it as much, because I think the people that get it, and they get the returns from it. And that's what matters the most at the end of the day. But yeah, of course, like it's great. And it's great to see Nate has been posting as well. And I don't want to give more publicity to, because we're not here to talk about Hockey Stack. But either way, he made a post on this, like how Hockey Stack is able to map out that journey, and how, most importantly, the insights that it gives out, they're not black and white. Of course, they wouldn't be, right? Like there's actually a thinking between, okay, so the conclusion of this cannot be the pricing page is the highest converting one, we need to optimize for more pricing page views. Of course, right? Like it's more so about what pieces of content are driving the most engagement, how much scroll depth are we getting in this page of the, this media, whatever, or series of content, all of that stuff. And again, that is depth of ideas, is how profound are you penetrating your market, right? Like either way, to move on though, because I don't want to go around in circles, and I love this topic though, but how would you say, how do you think companies are currently leveraging influencers, subject matter experts, and thought leaders? Where are they failing? How to not do it, right? Because when talking about how to do it, there's a bunch of nuance, and some strategy could work for some company and some others won't, and there's a bunch of different mediums and channels and whatnot. But how to not do it? Because I think there's a bunch of principles or fundamentals that you can share that are going to be super useful in order to find the good way for every company out there.
One element that I would say cuts across all three, for influencers, thought leaders, and subject matter experts, is the time horizon. So one thing that I'm seeing that's a huge mistake across all of these is we're going to do an influencer campaign. Oh, okay, so you're gonna have this person do 3 posts for you to like drive to an event. That's advertising. That's not an influencer partnership, right? Like, we're going to have our subject matter experts, we're going to have them, like, we're going to do a SME campaign. Are you now? And what is that campaign going to be? Well, they're going to write one article, then they're going to post that article 3 times on LinkedIn, and then they're going to speak at this conference, and they're going to promote the article so that we can track it. That's the campaign. And I'm like, that's like not even a proper that's like not even pillar content. Like, that's one article. Like, this poor SME has to like showcase all of their knowledge in a single article. Like, are you kidding me? Right? And then obviously, as I alluded to before, the doing thought leadership for a founder. Yeah, we're gonna do some thought leadership for the founder this quarter. Oh, this quarter, are you? A whole quarter? Wow. Right? So all of these, because they are based on human relationships and building trust, that's the key common element, is that you're asking a human to do something that is uniquely human, right? The robots can help you programize the ads and optimize the ads. You can use spreadsheets for that. You can use AI for that. You can look at the dashboards, right? Advertising, you can scale that to the moon. The thing that is uniquely human among influencers, subject matter experts, and thought leaders is that they have that connection with the audience, and then there's a certain amount of depth of expertise. So the first thing I'll say is, when you are going to work with any of these humans, it's going to take time, right? You don't build strong relationships and build trust with 3 interactions or in a single interaction. That's not how humans work. We have to constantly be engaged and see this person and understand that they're authentic. So that's the first thing. Second thing I'll say is treating all of these as if they are interchangeable. They are not. They have different goals. So normally in the case of an influencer, this is somebody who has decent credibility. They're very strong in the profile pillar. They may or may not be strong in the prolific pillar. Usually they're prolific in a single channel. So for example, in B2C marketing, lifestyle influencers are very prolific on Instagram, and maybe they've got one long form piece, they do their outfit of the day and they post that on a blog, but they're every day they're posting their outfit, or if they're a recipe blogger or something like that, right? They're very prolific on just Instagram, but they're not really prolific anywhere else, right? In B2B, a lot of the influencers that shows up, particularly, so I'm in SaaS and we have a strong developer audience. So we've got a lot of folks who participate in Discord, right? Like they're on a Discord server, they run this huge community that's on Discord, but they might not be as prolific or have as strong a profile on LinkedIn, for example. So usually influencers are really only prolific in one way, in terms of they make a lot of video content on YouTube. That's it. So that's an area. And then the depth of ideas is usually pretty weak. They're not saying new things. They might be excellent curators. They bring people together. They do brand collaborations where they'll do a reveal. And so the new thing is, Apple sent me the latest watch. Let's test out some features of it, right? Or let's test out this AI video tool and let's do 3 of them and see which one we think works, right? Like that's not particularly new, it's curated. So influencers in that case, they help you get access to a new audience that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. And they usually help you get access to a broader audience than you would normally get. Subject matter experts actually tend to be very strong in the depth of ideas pillar because they're like in it and they're working really hard and they're like pushing things forward. They're running these experiments. Like this is the person usually internally that you go to where you're like, man, I'm trying to solve this problem. I don't know. I've tried this. I've tried all these solutions and it's not working. Who can help me solve this? And everybody has this person in the company. There's the one person where it's like, this person will know. And sure enough, you go to them and they're like, funny enough, I was actually experimenting with this one thing. And you're like, how do you know things, right? So they have very high credibility, usually pretty strong in depth of ideas, but like no profile, and they're not prolific. And so if you want to start elevating a subject matter expert, you're going to have to give them opportunities to share externally. But again, from a marketing mix standpoint, these are actually perfect people to help you shape your pillar assets because they have that craft knowledge. And so they're excellent partners. Maybe they don't want to be public. Maybe they hate social media. Maybe they hate public speaking, but they are willing to share their knowledge and partner with you from a marketing standpoint. So they can be, the fuel to give you the insights. Now, personally, I think you should give them credit for that. You can note editorial contribution. You can pull out quotes or something in the article, but I think they should get credit for that. Even if they're like, can I just stay behind the scenes? Ask them, but at least shout out like, hey, Ashley contributed to this piece, so that their expertise is recognized. And then obviously thought leaders, we've been talking about, that's the longer term trust. That's to help position the brand at a higher level. That's to help shape the category and positioning. If you're wanting to play in a new space, thought leadership helps you shape that category. For example, so for Atlassian, as an example, a thought leadership example would be around developer experience. So there's a number of tools that are starting to pop up in this space, but the higher level conversation about developer productivity, developer joy, developer experience, like that's more of a thought leadership pillar, because that's a new conversation in the market that we're helping to shape. We've done that as well. It's called the Atlassian Team Playbook. And I would argue that has a lot of thought leadership elements to it as well, where it's really, we do original research. We've got some organizational psychologists on our team that do original research about teamwork, effective meetings, communication, leadership and management, how teams can work together. They then codify that. So they put out the research and then they come out with kind of some tips or exercises or rituals that you need to be able to implement that. And then those get codified into what we call plays. And these are things that you can do with your team to help improve those ways of working. So, and again, that positions us as, obviously, from a software perspective, we make collaboration tools, but you could do all the team stuff, whether you buy our products or not. of course, there's some product proof points where we're like, yeah, actually, we have a template in Confluence that'll help you do this. Or, oh, we actually have a template in Trello if you want to try to do this. Or you can just do it with sticky notes or conversation, right? So there is that connection. But that's what I would say about the three of them. A mistake is the time horizon first. And then another mistake is using them interchangeably or trying to force the different types of creators to be a different type of creator.
Yeah, it's funny. Dave Garrard was talking about how some people ask, like in companies, they ask for, can you give me a list of the best 10, top 20, top 50 influencers in XYZ industry? And it's like, if I need to give you a list, there's not going to be like, that's not the way you do it, right? Like, and it's funny. Yeah, I want to pick back up what you said before, which is if you want to shift the conversation, you got to be in the conversation. It's like these people, some companies want to have a say or want to and want to do, as you were saying, that's advertising. That's not influencer marketing. That's not thought leadership. That's not content marketing, right? The way you do it is if you want to have an impact in the conversation, you got to be in the conversation. You cannot be from your, on your throne and like, okay, let's hire this influencer, let's do this campaign here and there, and then we're going to impact the whole space, right? Like nobody knows you, there's not that prolificness or however that's said, and whatnot. So you cannot expect it. And the time horizon there implies a lot, because it's like, of course it's not going to work if you only do it for 1 quarter, right? Like it takes a ton of time. Every time I think about it, when I compare myself to other creators that have, I don't know, 20, 30, 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, it's like, of course they would. They've been doing content for like 10 years, right? Or 5 years. Or like, and I've been here for like a year, if anything, right? So it's like you gotta keep that in mind. And companies are kind of delusional sometimes with that. And I think it's because we've come from there's been phases in the market in which when you hop onto something new and you're pioneering a space, it's easy to get exponential returns without having that much input in the conversation, but that kind of like trains you in the bad way and makes you think that with just one little program here and there you can make big changes. Is not the way it works anymore. And most importantly these days, we gotta focus on really being efficient and actually moving the needle with every single move, because resources are not like to be wasted, of course, never, right? But more importantly this year. Either way, now we talked about the common mistakes, how to properly start a thought leadership program that actually works. What are the key core tenets? What are the must-dos, right? Things that they cannot miss. Especially, let's narrow it to the founder or CEO that wants to become a thought leader, knows that they have great ideas, they're doing great work, their company has raised money recently, Series B, Series C, whatever, but they have little time, haven't been creating content for a long time, or never ever have created content, and they want to get in the space, they want to become a thought leader. How do they start?
This is a hard thing, because the answer is you do actually have to start with having thoughts. So you are going to have to take time. I actually have this as, I think it's a slide when I've presented this at conferences, and it's got all of these different teams, right? There's like the individual, and there's a comms team, and there's an executive assistant, and there's a product marketing team, and there's an events team, right? There's all these people that everybody keeps saying like, we're going to get them to contribute. And what I show is that as you move up each level, if you're just starting out as the individual who wants to become the thought leader, you have to do 90% of the work. You have to do the thoughts. Now, it's a different conversation. I talk about this with a ghost writer versus a ghost thinker. You can't have a ghost thinker. If somebody else is going to come up with all the ideas and do all the research and do all the writing and do all the recording, they're the ones who are the thought leader, not you, right? Now, if you go back and you record a bunch of voice notes, or you go on 10 different podcasts to talk about an idea, or you're on stage, right? You write a book, whatever it is. And then you hand that to the team to parse out into LinkedIn posts or articles or whatever, transcribe it. That's fine. So it's not that you have to actually distribute all the content all the time yourself, but you have to have that source idea. How do you get those source ideas? I have a narrative framework. It's based on the content depths that I mentioned earlier, but anytime I start this work with someone new, one of the big things we do is map out 3 to 5 conceptual ideas and then start to map the strategic elements. And you can have strategic elements that go across multiple ideas. So I would say this content depths idea is actually is like a strategic depth. It's like a knowledge component, it's a process that you go through. This actually applies to both my thought leadership framework, my social media spectrum framework, and my content playground framework. So a strategic thing can go across multiple different conceptual level ideas. And then same thing for tactics, have them map out the tactics. If they've only got limited time, once you do that, pick the one conceptual idea that you're going to have them focus on. So in my case, maybe I just double down and I'm like, I'm going to talk all thought leadership all the time. I'm not going to talk about the content playground. I'm not going to talk about the social media spectrum. And I'm just going to go deep on thought leadership and have them start creating. One thing that is hard, especially for folks who are not fluent in this skill set, is finding multiple angles and different depths to speak about this. What are the metaphors? What is the shape of this problem? What is the shape of this solution? How did you wrestle with this? What are the other potential solutions that you discarded and why? Like, what about them didn't actually solve the problem? What about them is actually great and you're building on that, right? So that's another piece of it. I think too often everyone thinks that all of the content has to be original. They have to tell the whole story in every single asset. And that's why it's so time consuming. How am I going to write 3,000 words or deliver an hour-long talk every time? No, you only have to do that a few times. And then you start to get into these other angles, right? Like the attribution rabbit hole that we just went on. I end up talking about that in relation to my frameworks multiple times. Right? So I could have a whole conversation about attribution through the lens of just social media and tie that back to the social media spectrum, or through the lens of thought leadership and just tie that back to thought leadership, my framework, or through the lens of content strategy and only tie it back to my content strategy framework. Or I can have this conversation holistically across all the frameworks. That's 4 posts off of a single subtopic that I always get asked about when I talk about these frameworks, right? So when you get started, really be clear that the conceptual level ideas have enough depth. I think that's the other big mistake. A lot of people choose things because they're so focused on how do we drive product sales? That's not thought leadership. That's product sales. And that's great. You need quality content in product sales and product content. It's a separate thing. And so if you find that you're not excited to talk about it, you don't have that much to say about it, that you're struggling to come up with ideas, you've only got one angle, you can't think of any metaphors, it's actually probably not a great conceptual level idea for you to focus on. So run through the narratives. That's the first thing. Second thing is to focus on, I would say, start in a single channel and do that how you think. Like, I'm actually terrible at Twitter. I don't naturally think in that short, quippy format. I'm really good at LinkedIn because I think naturally in the style that LinkedIn rewards. Some people love Substack or Medium or a long form blog because they naturally think in 1,000 to 3,000 words. That's great. You go all in on Substack. That's totally fine. I think this is another mistake. People think you have to be on LinkedIn and Twitter and Reddit and Substack and YouTube and a podcast. And it's like, no wonder you're exhausted and failing. That's too many to start with, right? So pick a space. And I would say, it's good to pick like one core distribution outlet, whether that's YouTube or email or social media, and one core asset type in a way that you naturally think. So that could be video, it could be long form articles, etc. It could be audio, podcasts, whatever. But pick one to start so that you can at least start getting into that habit of content creation. That builds your foundation of source material, which, again, if you're a founder and executive, you've probably got a team or some budget to hire an agency. They can then take that source material and help you parse it out into other asset types and distribution channels.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, super important to mention that. Like, one channel, dominate it, focus on it. Once you're successful with it, you move on to the next. Or like start expanding, but don't try and do like 5 channels at a time when you haven't created content in your life. Like, it doesn't, of course you're going to fail, right? Like, most people fail at trying with one. Like, imagine if you were to try 5 at a time. Like, it doesn't make sense. Either way, I want to ask you, because, you know, and B2B, and look, there's a bunch of titles, right? There's a bunch of different titles. Everyone puts their own title and whatnot. And I'm wondering, what does a head of life cycle marketing and portfolio do on a day-to-day basis? Like, what does it actually mean? Because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering too, like, in that, and I know it's not that much related, but I want to tie that question to, you know, what advice, having been promoted 4 times at Atlassian, such a big company, and which has ranked, by the way, I was looking it up, as the 8th company in the world to work in. Which, congratulations for that. I'm sure you guys have a great culture, but yeah, like, what advice would you give to someone starting their career in B2B marketing in order to get promoted as much in such a company, or like to get in their foot in the door where they want to be, and do great work, and tie that back to, you know, how does your day-to-day look like and all that stuff?
Sure. So this role is a little bit unique. I'm actually in the process of building out the team and building out the kind of vision for the team and what we do. But effectively, we basically connect the dots between lifecycle marketing, demand generation, account-based marketing. So that set of disciplines within the marketing umbrella, product marketing, our events team, and then also our sales channel partnerships team. So really looking at how do we unite all of the different touch points across that journey. And in my case, specifically focused on that content strategy piece. So how do we take our events content and make sure that it gets repurposed across a bunch of different distribution channels and asset types to fuel demand gen, ABM, and lifecycle programs, and to empower product marketers to, you know, do the acquisition and conversion that they need? How do we adapt that from a sales perspective? All right, you're having all of these conversations from a sales perspective, or objection handling, or, you know, confusion. Great. How do we then take what product marketing is creating and translate that to meet those objections? Or how do we go to product marketing and say, hey, we're getting these objections. Can you translate this to product? Like, maybe there's a feature parity issue, or maybe there's actually a product problem that is coming up consistently in our sales conversations. Cool. How do we get that information back to product marketing? Once product marketing, in theory, in tandem with product, solves that and creates some enablement, how do we then get that back to the sales folks in a way that they can use that for their objection handling? From a demand gen lifecycle marketing perspective, right? How do we think holistically about that journey, not just paid, but how do we think holistically across that organic journey and connect from an SEO standpoint, that organic journey versus that paid journey, and where is the intersection point there? So my team is basically doing this. You know, if you've seen A Beautiful Mind, that movie from, I don't know, however many years ago at this point, where they've got like the big map and there's all these strings going across, that's kind of what my team does. We're like looking across with the strings and being like, haha, that string goes over there. In terms of how to get promoted and career advice, I think that in my case, being a generalist, many of the roles I've held at Atlassian have been kind of oddball roles. And it's because I really enjoy and am quite adept at connecting those dots. And so I have tend to sat at the intersection of at least 2 or 3 different teams or product portfolios. My prior role, I got the same question. The title is Director of Integrated Product Marketing. And everyone's like, what does an integrated product marketer do? And I'm like, it basically means I go across the whole portfolio instead of focusing on just a single product. The nice thing about that is that it means that I'm not loyal to a specific product, right? I am loyal to the audience journey. And so it's a nice pairing to have someone who only cares about the audience journey with someone who only cares about certain product revenue. When we partner, we can create really smart stories, distribution strategies, campaigns to meet the right audience at the right time with the right message in the right place, right? So it's actually a really great combination. And that's because I have gone across a number and sat across a number of different teams. When an opportunity opens up, I am aware of it. I have the relationships, and I've been able to say, here's the value I can add in this unique space because of kind of the background and skills that I have. So it's hard to say, like, here's how you do a career like mine. Like, obviously in hindsight, I can say, oh, I did these skills and as a generalist and I sat at the intersection and I connected these dots. The one piece of very tactical advice that I can give is to build those internal relationships, particularly if you're at a large company. It's just hard for people to have visibility into your work. And so it's not that no one's paying attention, it's that it's just harder to pay attention. And so making sure that you're cutting through that noise, building those relationships across your peers and with adjacent teams, that would be the biggest piece of tactical advice that I can give.
Love that. And I love how in this day and age with AI, I think soft skills and building relationships is becoming more and more important than ever. And I'm excited for that because honestly, I've never been the guy who gets the numbers or who gets, like, I'm not the most technical ever, right? Like it's just I've always been more so in the creative side of things, or like just more of a creator and more of living in the moment and feeling and all of that stuff, instead of just straight up do numbers or developing coding, all that stuff. And so I love that is your advice, because I think it's the most important thing. Like the hardest skill these days is just there's so much information out there and so much for free out there that everyone can learn the fundamentals and the specifics of a discipline. But what it's hard and it's intangible and that you cannot learn in any other way that through experience is to connect the dots and integrate different parts and actually have a holistic approach. Like all of that, and then put it together to create a plan or a roadmap or strategies and programs that can get executed by those who actually get the numbers and whatnot. That's where the actual skill relies, I think. And I love that you've been doing that, because it's just, great work. So I was about to ask you how to measure the impact of content creators and thought leaders, but we already talked about the attribution wars that we're living in. So I wanted to ask you as well, in 2024 and beyond, how do you see the relationship between B2B companies and the creator economy evolving?
I think that with the rise of AI, where you can churn out a lot of content, the quality of that content, the efficacy of that content is a separate issue. So I think that from a creator economy perspective, finding those people who have already found an audience that they resonate with, have a unique style that sets them apart from all the AI churned content, and have a values fit with the company, that's going to be the magic. And I think that can be a mix of empowering internal folks who are, fluent in this creation skill set and basically just mapping what they're doing already with something that can benefit the company. I think that's one way it'll happen. I think that we will see people move more towards long-term partnerships and understanding the value of working with people long-term, not just trying to do an advertising campaign or having them as a spokesperson. And then I also think that we're going to see a more nuanced understanding about what counts as a following. Right now, there's still a lot of focus on macro influencers or celebrity influencers. And I think that creators, those folks who have that fluent skill set in content creation, storytelling, specific distribution, and resonating with a specific audience, that like kind of boundary between that influencer and creator persona, I think that's going to continue to blur. And so we're going to see a lot more people having kind of non-traditional partnerships with brands, even if they're small. And it could be someone that is brought on to host a podcast. I'm seeing that get started as like a brand collab where it's like, this person really resonates. They're a great interviewer. They have relationships with great guests. So we're going to bring them on as a podcast host, right? That's one example where I think like the creator economy works. Even if this person doesn't have the largest following on their own, they're fluent in the skill set of creating a great podcast. And so let's combine those two. We'll give them the halo of the brand. We've maybe got good distribution, but we don't have time or desire or skill set to craft a great podcast. So let's hire kind of a single person to do that, right? That would be an example that I've already seen starting to happen. But I think that's what we're going to see in 2024 is those lines starting to blur and a greater focus on long-term partnerships, either with internal creators or with external creators.
So basically, companies are going to start to do content marketing right, basically, as they should.
Well, marketing's been around a long time, and there's a number of things that we still, like that's that can be my spicy take. Is like, oh, they're going to do it right, and I'm like, well, we marketers, sometimes we ruin everything. But yeah, sure, they'll start to do it right.
Hopefully. I mean, in the sense that I think it's just that, I mean, yeah, of course, marketing has been a while for the longest time. But my point is that this it's happening still, the shift of how buyers access information and whatnot. And there's still people that rely on TV to get their whatever, right? Like, so, I think, and I was talking to Liam Maroney in a podcast, and he was saying how it's unrealistic for him to think that the MQL model is going to disappear in 5 years. And he's right, of course, I think, because B2B, of course, it's always been slow, right? And so we got to understand that. But my point is that companies are going to start to see in the long run, in the absolute terms, that every quarter they try to do an advertised campaign with an influencer, it doesn't work, and they see other stuff working, and of course things are going to change in that sense. And I think Chris Walker was the other day saying that we see a lot of whiteness in terms of influencer marketing, try to encompass a lot of reach and focus a lot on the numbers. It's the same with the MQL model, right? It's always going about volume and more growth. Whereas we need to think in terms of efficiency for the MQL side of things, and in terms of content marketing, influencer marketing, I think we need to think in terms of depth, right, and resonance, level of frequency that we get to. So yeah, love that, and I agreed with you on that. We mentioned AI multiple times throughout this episode, and I want to touch on how do you think AI, and most importantly, machine learning, deep learning, personalized chatbots and personalization at scale and all of that stuff. How is that, do you see, is going to affect content strategy and in B2B, of course? And what are some roles that you think are or will be in danger or in need of reinventing themselves in B2B marketing?
I'll first say that I think it's not about replacing, it's about the partnership. And I think that there are at this point, every role other than even service jobs, we're seeing it where you've got little robots that will bring you your food to the table, right? So, there's very few jobs that I would say will not be reshaped by AI. In terms of how they are reshaped, I think that's still very up in the air. It's moving so fast that I think the legal landscape has not caught up with the technology. I think that the skills landscape has not caught up with the technology. So I'll just set that context. I do think from a B2B marketing standpoint, and particularly in the conversation around thought leadership, that AI can solve all the 101 level stuff, right? It's very easy to get ChatGPT to tell you what are the 4 P's of marketing, right? I don't need a human to tell me that. Product, price, place, promotion. Yeah, that's fine, right? This conversation, what is thought leadership? The humans still can't even properly answer that question, right? So I think in the question around content, thought leaders, etc., I think that using AI to help repurpose your content, scale that reach, I think that's going to become more common. I think that, but I do think that the human side is going to continue to be even more important, and that ability to look someone face to face, not even in video, because now you can get AI to create pretty solid videos for you using your own voice and your own likeness. Some concerning ethical implications of that, but we'll leave that to folks who are experts in that. But that ability to build those relationships, I think, is going to be even more key. And then using AI to scale. It already has significant impact on SEO. For example, there's been a number of teardowns recently of, we stole all this traffic from our competitor and ranked #1 for 20,000 keywords. Ha. And Google was like, nope. And like basically penalized the website into oblivion to where now they get zero traffic. So anyone who thinks they found a hack to like, we're going to scale the content with AI, you know, the people who are making these tools are at least half a step ahead of you in that way. And so I think that the mindset that we're going to hack things in the same way that we've had the conversation, you know, marketing automation platforms, it was the same thing. It's the end of marketing. We're all going to lose our jobs. We're going to automate everything. That's not what happened. We end up creating a whole job profile for like a marketing automation specialist or strategist or whatever, right? Like Marketo's certified thing, HubSpot certified professional, right? So that was an all over the place answer because I think that we are still all over the place. Like anybody who tells you they're like, we've solved it with AI. I'm like, Sora just came out. Like, I don't even, what?
Yeah.
Like, you haven't solved it when like, Sora is apparently the new game changer in AI video creation, right? So I do think that at the core, I think that human connection is going to be more important in the age of AI. I think all roles are going to be reshaped by AI. And I think that core content strategy and thought leadership strategy will continue to kind of be the same in terms of, you know, humans and quality and that kind of thing. I think the execution is going to change substantially as the distribution platforms basically incorporate AI capabilities into their own algorithms and their own feature sets.
Agreed. Well, we'll leave it at this because I know we need to wrap it up. But yeah, great stuff. It's been a pleasure to have you. Actually, I agree with you in a lot of things. And we will be hoping to have you again in the FounderVideo podcast sooner than later because it's been really thoughtful conversation. I hope that everyone who listens is going to get a lot of value. I think I'm sure that they're going to get a lot of value. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to touch with you. And yeah, we'll see you around in the LinkedIn feed. For everyone that wants to follow you, Ashley Faus, right, on LinkedIn. Any other stuff that you want to promote or anything that you want to refer people to? Nothing?
No, that sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. And I look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we'll see you around. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the FounderVideo podcast with Will Martin, and we'll see you on the next episode.